Last week, the White House issued an executive order completely cutting off financial assistance to the
Trump has quietly pulled the plug on Africa. No more aid, no more guarantees, and no more boots on the ground. No speeches, no warning. Just a silent withdrawal wrapped in the language of efficiency and burden sharing. But why now? And is Trump making a mistake? Let's find out. Donald Trump prides himself on making deals. But in Africa, he may have just made a misstep that even he can't spin into a win. This wasn't a loud retreat. It was quiet, calculated. A few bases shut down here. A few aid agencies slashed there. No grand exit, just the slow disassembly of America's decades-long footprint on the continent. Trump's second-term strategy in Africa seems simple at first glance. Save money, shift risk, and let African nations carry their own burden. But the reality unfolding beneath that surface tells a different story. One where Trump isn't pulling out because he's in control. He's pulling out because he's lost the leverage. For decades, the U.S. kept one foot in Africa and the other in global dominance. It could afford to intervene selectively, training troops here, dropping aid there, while keeping its distance when things got messy. But now, Africa has changed. So has the world. And what Trump doesn't seem to realize is that walking away doesn't free America from responsibility. It strips America of relevance. In trying to shrink America's role in Africa, Trump may have accidentally shrunk America's power. While he's focused on protecting the homeland, the rest of the world is protecting its positions in Africa. China is building, Russia is maneuvering, Turkey is investing. Even the Gulf states are entrenching themselves. And as each new player digs in, America's absence grows more visible, not as a threat to Africa, but as a sign of U.S. decline. And here's where Trump miscalculated. He assumed Africa needed America more than America needed Africa. That hasn't been true for a long time. Africa isn't sitting by the door waiting for Washington's return. It's moving on, negotiating new defense deals, building trade routes that bypass U.S. systems, and investing in homegrown security alliances that aren't dependent on Western approval. Countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have openly defied U.S. pressure and charted their course, and they're not looking back. In this new geopolitical arena, Trump's strategy has backfired. By choosing to disengage, he's handed diplomatic real estate to America's rivals without a fight. And worse, he no longer has the credibility to intervene if things spiral out of his control. Even U.S. allies on the continent are now hedging their bets. Ghana is strengthening ties with China. Kenya is building new corridors with the Gulf. South Africa has doubled down on BRICS. These moves aren't a rejection of America. They're a recognition that America has stopped showing up. And if Washington wants to be taken seriously again, it won't be enough to throw around buzzwords like burden sharing. It'll need to earn back trust. But can Trump do that? Not easily. Because the cost of his withdrawal isn't just military or financial, it's reputational. Africa sees the U.S. not as a strategic ally anymore, but as an unpredictable actor. Loud one day, absent the next, and always calculating short-term optics over long-term partnerships. That image is hard to shake, especially when rivals are offering consistency, even if it comes with strings. So now Trump finds himself in a paradox. He wanted to cut costs and scale back commitments. Instead, he's weakened America's position in the one region where global competition is intensifying fastest. He wanted to project strength. Instead, he's projected to retreat. He thought he was writing the rules. But Africa didn't stop playing. It just found new players. And while Trump is busy claiming victory from a shrinking map, Africa is redrawing the board. So the real question isn't what will Africa do without Trump. It's how Trump will recover from the strategic space he just surrendered without realizing it. Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. In geopolitics, there's one scenario worse than being hated: being irrelevant. That's the quiet humiliation Donald Trump is facing in Africa. After scaling back U.S. military operations and shuttering drone bases with all the bravado of a man cutting losses, he expected shockwaves. He expected panic. Instead, the continent barely flinched. That's not because the threats disappeared. Violence is still rising. Militants are still gaining ground in the Sahel, and borders are still bleeding. But the panic Trump expected never arrived. No government came running. No emergency summits were called. No begging letters landed on his desk. The silence wasn't gratitude, it was indifference. Trump left. Africa adjusted. In his worldview, retreat is a power move. You leave the table, so others come chasing you. But Africa didn't chase. It simply turned to the next available option. In many regions, that meant forming new security pacts, leaning harder on regional forces, or in some cases, yes, dealing with China, Russia, or Turkey. Trump thought he was holding leverage by walking away. In reality, he walked off the stage, and the show continued without him. Take Niger, where the U.S. once operated one of its most advanced drone bases at Agadez. When the Nigerian military leadership shifted, and the U.S. packed up its assets, it wasn't just a logistical move. It was meant as a message. Without us, your security collapses. But that message didn't land. Niger's government didn't beg for the base to stay. They started looking east. They opened their doors to Russian advisors. They explored military technology deals with Ankara. They began asking harder questions. If American drones had been here for years, why did insurgency still spread? That's the uncomfortable part of Trump's miscalculation. The absence of results means there's no loyalty to the brand. For years, the U.S. helped train African soldiers, provided some tech and tactical knowledge, and ran war games like African Lion. But results? On the ground, the insurgencies outpaced the training. Local commanders often found American support slow, fragmented, and tangled in red tape. So when Trump withdrew forces, local armies didn't feel the sting of betrayal. They felt the weight of reality. They had always been alone. Now they just stopped pretending otherwise. And that's where Trump's strategy implodes. He wanted to shift the burden to African states without ever admitting how little actual burden he had carried. The Pentagon could boast 6,000 personnel in Africa, but spread across 50-plus nations. Most were trainers, intel liaisons, or logistics officers. It looked impressive on PowerPoint. On the battlefield, it meant little. So now, as U.S. presence fades, African militaries aren't failing in Trump's absence. They're failing at the same rate they were when he was still there. That's not a defense of their struggles. It's an indictment of Washington's overinflated self-importance. Trump thought pulling troops would make African leaders nervous. But in many capitals, Accra, Bamako, Luanda, the sentiment wasn't fear. It was clarity. Clarity that the U.S. had never been a dependable security partner. Clarity that new arrangements were needed. Clarity that African solutions must come from within the continent, not from a far-off capital whose interest comes and goes with election cycles. But here's the twist. Trump's retreat doesn't mean America has no footprint. It means it has no control. Wherever the U.S. once had a strong grip, local forces are now improvising. Some are cooperating with Wagner. Others are forming neighborhood alliances. Others are simply trying to hold ground until a better offer comes along. The strategic discipline the U.S. once imposed, even if inconsistently, is evaporating. And that chaos, it won't knock on Trump's door right away, but it will come. Because the thing about security vacuums is, they don't stay empty. Trump thought he was saving face by pulling back. Instead, he's watching his influence unravel. Not through confrontation, but through quiet irrelevance. Africa didn't need to revolt. It just needed to stop waiting for American approval. So now the map is changing. Not dramatically, not violently, but steadily. And not in Trump's favor. And that leads us to a harder truth. If Trump can't dictate the terms anymore, who can? So Trump walked off the table, expecting the game to fall apart. But here's the twist. The table didn't flip. It just got bigger. And now there are new players, different currencies, different rules. And Africa, once seen as the prize, is learning how to deal the cards. That's the part Washington didn't see coming. Because yes, Russia is circling. Yes, China is building. But something else is happening too. African governments aren't just picking sides between global powers anymore. They're negotiating with them, playing them off one another, signing deals with one hand while rewriting contracts with the other. And it's not chaos, it's strategy. Trump's exit didn't freeze the continent in uncertainty. It accelerated its political learning curve. Look at Burkina Faso. After France and the US lost their sway, the government didn't collapse. It consolidated. Military leadership under Ibrahim Traoré didn't just kick out foreign forces. It replaced them with bilateral cooperation tailored to its terms. Russian advisors were welcomed, but not worshipped. Local industries were prioritized. African alliances like the Alliance of Sahel States AES emerged, not as Western puppets or Eastern proxies, but as declarations of autonomy. This is what's unfolding across the map. In Ethiopia, the government flirts with Chinese financing while refusing to give up sovereignty over its internal security. In Senegal, Western-backed democratic institutions coexist with increasing Gulf-funded economic zones. In South Africa, BRICS membership doesn't mean ideological loyalty. It means bargaining power. This is Africa's new diplomacy. Non-alignment as leverage. The world expected Africa to choose a side, East or West. What they didn't expect was for Africa to start writing its terms. And that's where Trump's absence becomes a liability, not for Africa, but for Trump himself. By removing America's influence, he's removed America's options. The continent hasn't stopped making deals. It's just stopped asking permission. And what's filling the space isn't chaos, it's confidence. That confidence isn't always stable. It's sometimes wrapped in authoritarianism. It can come with populism or coups or radical shifts, but it's rooted in something real. A generation of African leaders and civil actors who no longer see Washington as the center of gravity. This isn't just about military partnerships or foreign bases. It's about who gets to define the narrative. In the past, U.S. embassies dictated talking points. Today, regional broadcasters, online influencers, and local Pan-African media shape the conversation. African youth don't wait for CNN to tell them what matters. They see the world through WhatsApp threads, encrypted chats, and streets buzzing with anti-imperialist slogans. And that matters more than most policymakers in D.C. understand. Because when Trump pulled out, he didn't just lose terrain. He lost credibility. And in the new Africa, credibility is currency. Not who has the biggest economy or the most missiles, but who shows up without condescension. Who listens. Who adapts. Who doesn't assume ownership of Africa's future. That's what China learned early. What Russia is learning now. What Turkey and even India are testing with increasing sophistication. They come not as saviors, but as options. Trump comes with exit plans. And while he frames his disengagement as strength, Africa sees it as surrender. Not of power, but of relevance. Here's the kicker. Even as new players enter the field, Africa is becoming less dependent on all of them. Digital innovation, intracontinental trade, new currencies, Pan-African security pacts. These aren't fantasies anymore. They're frameworks being piloted, adjusted, and in some cases, implemented. And Trump? He's watching all of this from the sidelines, still convinced the game is rigged in his favor, not realizing the board has changed, the rules have shifted, and he's no longer even holding a seat. So the question now isn't who will control Africa. It's how long until Africa controls the conversation itself, and what happens when it does. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. By now, even Trump's closest strategists must be wondering, can we still get back in, or has Africa changed the locks for good? The silence from African leaders speaks volumes. There are no angry condemnations, no fiery press conferences begging for American presence. That's the part Western analysts still misread. Africa isn't protesting America's exit. It's simply replacing the need for America altogether. This is the final quiet sting in Trump's strategy. He didn't just walk away from the partnership. He made himself replaceable. Once upon a time, the U.S. had something no one else could offer. Military dominance, development dollars, global media power. But in the space Trump has left behind, those advantages are starting to feel outdated, even clumsy. China's infrastructure is coming faster. Russia's support comes with fewer questions. India, Turkey, and the Gulf offer nimble, flexible packages. Even regional African blocs are innovating with their financing tools, security mechanisms, and diplomatic alternatives. Meanwhile, the U.S., It's still selling old slogans from an empty seat. Let's be brutally honest. Most African leaders no longer believe Washington is consistent enough to rely on. Not just under Trump, but across administrations. Biden tried to repair the cracks, but the continent saw how easily progress was reversed. If the next election can wipe out every agreement, every investment, every promise, then what's the point of partnership? Trump has accelerated this distrust to the point of exhaustion. And now, there's a deeper realization among African governments. You don't negotiate with a superpower that can ghost you overnight. You build your options. That's what we're seeing now. Not an anti-American movement, but an Africa-first architecture. In West Africa, the AES bloc is coordinating military strategy independently. In East Africa, cross-border infrastructure is being built without a single Western blueprint. In Southern Africa, states are launching their rare earth deals, bypassing Western extraction models. And in the North, the Mediterranean dialogue is happening more with Europe than with Washington. In short, Africa is diversifying, and Trump is no longer one of the priority tabs. This isn't revenge, it's realism. Even countries once deeply aligned with the US, like Kenya or Ghana, are no longer asking how to fix the old relationship. They're asking if it's even worth fixing. That's not a moral question, it's a strategic one. Trump's brand of foreign policy has made Africa hyper-aware of how disposable it was in American eyes. Now, Africa is simply returning the favor. And here's the irony that history will remember. The door didn't close on Trump. Trump closed it on himself. He believed disengagement would make America look strong, that by walking away, he'd force the continent to come begging. Instead, he discovered that the world no longer works that way. Global power isn't about absence anymore. It's about relevance. And you can't be relevant in a room you abandoned. But could Trump return? Could the US rebuild what was lost? Theoretically, yes. But the conditions have changed. To re-enter, America would need to do something it's never done well. Listen, not lecture. Show up consistently, not selectively. Support without controlling. And most importantly, stay. Not just when it's convenient. Whether Trump or any future administration is capable of that is another story. But for now, one thing is certain. Africa has moved on. It's not the same continent that the US once overlooked or underestimated. It's younger, sharper, more unified, more aware of its worth, and far less patient with partners who come and go with every electoral mood swing. So if Trump ever wants back in, the price will be steep. The conditions will be strict. And the invitation, it won't be automatic. Because the table he once walked away from, Africa has already built a new one. And this time, it doesn't need a seat with an American flag. Do you think this is the only fair response to Trump? Will the US regret it? Let us know in the comments section. Should Africa allow the US to return? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Last week, the White House issued an executive order completely cutting off financial assistance to the
Trump has quietly pulled the plug on Africa. No more aid, no more guarantees, and no more boots on the ground. No speeches, no warning. Just a silent withdrawal wrapped in the language of efficiency and burden sharing. But why now? And is Trump making a mistake? Let's find out. Donald Trump prides himself on making deals. But in Africa, he may have just made a misstep that even he can't spin into a win. This wasn't a loud retreat. It was quiet, calculated. A few bases shut down here. A few aid agencies slashed there. No grand exit, just the slow disassembly of America's decades-long footprint on the continent. Trump's second-term strategy in Africa seems simple at first glance. Save money, shift risk, and let African nations carry their own burden. But the reality unfolding beneath that surface tells a different story. One where Trump isn't pulling out because he's in control. He's pulling out because he's lost the leverage. For decades, the U.S. kept one foot in Africa and the other in global dominance. It could afford to intervene selectively, training troops here, dropping aid there, while keeping its distance when things got messy. But now, Africa has changed. So has the world. And what Trump doesn't seem to realize is that walking away doesn't free America from responsibility. It strips America of relevance. In trying to shrink America's role in Africa, Trump may have accidentally shrunk America's power. While he's focused on protecting the homeland, the rest of the world is protecting its positions in Africa. China is building. Russia is maneuvering. Turkey is investing. Even the Gulf states are entrenching themselves. And as each new player digs in, America's absence grows more visible, not as a threat to Africa, but as a sign of U.S. decline. And here's where Trump miscalculated. He assumed Africa needed America more than America needed Africa. That hasn't been true for a long time. Africa isn't sitting by the door waiting for Washington's return. It's moving on, negotiating new defense deals, building trade routes that bypass U.S. systems, and investing in homegrown security alliances that aren't dependent on Western approval. Countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have openly defied U.S. pressure and charted their course, and they're not looking back. In this new geopolitical arena, Trump's strategy has backfired. By choosing to disengage, he's handed diplomatic real estate to America's rivals without a fight.